Something big happened this week. Big enough that 10 years ago it would have stopped the country cold. We invaded another nation and took their head of state. And if your reaction was a shrug or a half-formed, well, he probably deserved it, that reaction matters more than the event itself. Because when extraordinary things stop feeling extraordinary, it's not stability, it's adaptation. This episode isn't about politics. It's about how smart, decent people slowly learn to tolerate things they never would have accepted before. If that makes you uncomfortable, good. This is Shrink the Nation. Welcome to Season 2. This is Shrink the Nation, a podcast for thoughtful, informed adults, preferably holding a drink and definitely holding a thought. The views expressed here are ours alone. They do not represent our employers, institutions, licensing boards, government agencies, bourbon distilleries, or most emphatically, our families. They've been very clear about that. This show is for education and entertainment only. Nothing you hear is medical, psychiatric, legal, or professional advice. We're clinicians, not your clinicians. If something we say stirs you up, that's not a crisis, that's a journal entry, or an email sent politely. We're here to challenge ideas, not diagnose strangers on the internet. And if you are in real distress, please reach out to a professional who can actually help you. Hey, this is David, over 20 years in the military, dual-boarded psychiatrist, and once again, the designated adult in the room, at least on paper. I was planning on doing a dry January this year. That plan lasted about as long as a Saturday press conference where a country announces it abducted a foreign leader at gunpoint and called it stability. So in the spirit of realism, tonight I'm very much not doing dry January. I'm drinking Michter's US 1 small batch, solid, dependable, quietly confident, and unlike most institutions we'll be talking about tonight, it actually does what it promises. Classic Michter's profile, caramel, vanilla, a little oak, just enough spice to remind you it's there. Nothing flashy, no gimmicks, just confidence in a glass, which frankly feels a little aspirational right now. And with that, I'll hand it over to Robbie, who unlike me may still be pretending this is a dry January household.
So far, absolutely is a dry January. Yet again, I got overly engaged in taskings and didn't make it to the store. So what I'm looking forward to trying is a couple of things. A friend of mine who is very into bourbon has recommended the Evan Williams bottled in bond version, which is 100 proof. Says it's fantastic. It's Evan Williams, so it's not very expensive. He said it's, one of the best, often overlooked. So I am looking forward to trying that at some point eventually. But today I'm yet again drinking coffee, Starbucks, the blonde roast.
Okay.
Anyway.
At least it's blonde.
Yeah, it's...
I love burnt coffee.
Right. Well, I have a type. What can I say? Rob, I got 26 years in psychiatry and 30-ish in the military. And I am so excited to talk about attacking another country.
Yeah, looking forward to it. For anybody who has been burying their head in the sand, which you don't need to do that, people. Come on, come out, have a drink with us.
Yeah.
What happened on Saturday, January 3rd, was a press conference that laid out some military action in Venezuela, where the U.S., the dictator, president, whatever,
the head of state,
Maduro, and his wife took them out of the country.
Because they're a bookended pair, apparently. You got to take them both.
This excites me because there is so much psychology behind this action. Gosh, what better way to start off season 2 than an abduction?
No, I concur with you. Good way to start with a bang. But before we talk about the psychology of it, I want to step back and talk about the military aspect of it from a purely, and this is not political, this is not psychological, and this is not ethical, but from a purely military standpoint, what we did is just shy of stunning. We were able to infiltrate a foreign nation under circumstances in which they had a reasonable guess that we were coming. So they were at a heightened level of alert. We were able to abduct a specific targeted individual. We were able to exfil, to get out of there with no loss of U.S. life. This is movie level stuff. I cannot wait to actually read the reality of what happened. Now, I'm saying I think there's been some hints that there were at least a few U.S. service people who were injured, not critically injured, but injured. I am going to guess it was a non-zero sum of Venezuelan people who probably were killed and or injured. But from a purely military standpoint, engaging in this kind of operation is pretty stunning. It's amazing, actually, that, the boys of Delta Force,
which doesn't exist.
Yeah, true. The non-existent Delta Force boys, pulled something off that is just shy of miraculous to go into another nation and extract a very specific individual. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. No, this is movie level shit. Imagine Netflix might get their hands on it, or
Probably next week there'll be a movie.
yeah, maybe Paramount. I imagine Paramount Plus will probably be more like.
It'll be some goddamn streaming platform that I don't have.
I figure with David Ellison, they probably already had rights to it before it even occurred.
Well, given the level of our political engagement in choosing movies, I'm going to guess that the rights were given prior to the operation. Well, it'll come out with the Jackie Chan movie. That plus this will probably headline. It'll be like a dual movie blockbuster kind of thing.
Yeah, I imagine it's probably going to involve John Krasinski. It'll be John Krasinski and The Rock. Why not? That sounds pretty good.
No, you nailed it. You nailed it. Absolutely. They're going to be the headliners. It'll be very dramatic, I'm sure.
It'll be excellent. I want to be clear that Nicolás Maduro, from our perspective, the U.S., not a great guy. Definitely a dictator. Definitely does some pretty terrible, evil shit. Kills people. Did, by all accounts, steal an election. Not a good dude. I don't think that's in question. I think a lot of people can be excited that he's no longer in power. It's what is going to happen moving forward that is probably the more concerning of the things. But let's talk about, what are we looking at? Why do we care? Why do we even give a shit?
Well, so my attention has been drawn to this. So I've been watching network news from a meta analysis kind of standpoint. What I have been struck by with myself personally is that the grand total of my response to this has been, I've not felt the weight of what we did. Now, if we step back from this, what we did as a nation is that we engaged in a hot operation. We attacked another nation. Not only did we attack them, we invaded them and we abducted the head of state of that nation. And that is a incredibly big deal. I mean, that's a big thing. What, again, from a meta-analysis standpoint, what I have been struck by with myself is how little emotion, surprise, I've not felt it as being that big a deal. I was struck by the precision of the operation. I have not been struck in any level. You know, I think back to other times when we have attacked other nations, even when we bombed Iran, there was some angst that it initiated in me that we had just struck another nation. In this case, nothing. I have no emotional content associated with this. And that in and of itself has struck me as being interesting, worth consideration.
For me, I agree in some ways. Like I don't know what the major effect is going to be of this, as far as from our perspective outside of the questionable future that exists for that country. I want to step back and think about this the way that I would think about why any patient would come to see me. The big question being, why now? The way that I want to wrap my brain around why this happened now. I think we have to look at what's been happening over the last year, 6 months, 3 months, and say, okay, why does this make sense to have happened now? Because we've been doing it before, and hopefully our listeners, all tens of them, have some familiarity with Bowen family systems theory. I think we've been using that as a good analogy, and I think it works really nicely in this scenario. What I want to say is that this political system as it stands today really resembles that high anxiety family. And if we break it down, we have our executive branch, which would be our overfunctioning parent attempting to manage anxiety through dominance. We have our legislative branch, which is the paralyzed, anxious co-parent not doing anything. We have the public, you and I and everyone else, who are just emotionally flooded children of this system. Then we have this narrative. What's the narrative been for the last several years, really, but even in the last few months? How has the narrative shifted within this system to allow this to happen? And really the foreshadowing of it, there were definitely signs that this might have happened. I mean, we were attacking quote unquote narco terrorists off the coast of Venezuela for months without clear reason beyond that they were somehow trafficking fentanyl into our country, which we know they weren't, when they really were trafficking cocaine. And in all fairness, probably not a significant percentage of cocaine is coming from Venezuela as much as from other countries. So what were we doing? This maybe some foreshadowing, but our system has been held together, at least in the last few months, under this idea that tariffs will protect you. The economy is strong. corruption will be exposed through the Epstein files, and just trust the plan. Bowen's family system doesn't require that narrative to be true. This is just what was being sold. And it just needs to be coherent enough to hold the anxiety of the whole system. If all that was holding the anxiety, why escalate to this next step?
Yeah, coherent enough. That is another thing that has struck me just recently, is that these stories don't have to actually hold water under duress. When we scrutinize the stories, they start to fray really quickly. That's not really the point. The point is they just have to be plausible enough that it allows our anxiety to reduce so that we don't actually pick them apart. We don't scrutinize them. But the scrutiny about these boat attacks and the questionable nature of them. But I'm stepping back, and from the jump on this process where we started off destroying these boats, then we took control of much larger boats. The story of narco terrorism was plausible enough that we didn't necessarily have to pick at it. And really what it's built to is this arc in which we started off attacking these boats, then we started taking boats, and now we have invaded a country and stolen their head of state. And he's not a good guy. This is part of this process, is that because he's not a good guy, some people, many people, maybe even most people are going to start off with that he's not a good guy. And the story then falls into place behind that. But that's really not the point. That's kind of the end state. The end state is he's not a good guy. Okay.
It's more simplification when nuance is the reality.
Well, absolutely. So what we're talking about is this arc that was built to basically get to this point. If we go back months and months and months when we started attacking these boats, that was instrumental to get to this point. And it's only with the arc of time that you can see that was not a thing in and of itself. That was a thing that was building on a thing, which built on a thing, which led to this moment. There's going to be moments to come. But, why? Why did we ultimately do this? Why are we ultimately, as was said in a press conference yesterday, why are we in charge of Venezuela now? And how's that going to look? How's that going to play out? What's that mean to the people of Venezuela, the 30 million folks? And why so silent about it all the way up, this whole arc? And it does, absolutely. It fits very well with Bowen family systems in how families can see. When you're inside the family, you don't necessarily see it, but this progression of events that lead to badness, they just remain silent because that's what works for the system at that moment.
The why now question, which I've been asking myself or kind of poking around, if we use that Bowen family systems theory, we look at a couple of things that have happened over the last few months that I think would help understand why now. One is that there was this narrative failure on the economics related to the tariffs. The promise was that there was going to be these tariffs, protection, lower prices for everybody. And the reality's been higher grocery bills for people and no clear explanation as to how the tariffs are going to somehow bring in more money. That's been a question since they were brought up for a lot of reasons. I'm not an economist, so I can't get into the weeds on it because I just can't. But the idea of using tariffs to bring in more revenue by moving manufacturing back into the country doesn't hold a lot of water for a few reasons, but one being that if you're using the tariffs to bring manufacturing back into the country, then there won't be tariffs on the things that are being made in the country. Therefore, you're not going to make a lot more money off of those items. But also the fact that a lot of the things that we bring into the country, we can't actually produce in our country, or at least not in a reasonable time frame to actually make the manufacturing feasible within the country. And so there's a lot of holes in that argument. So as the wheels start coming off of that narrative, anxiety starts to go up, especially if you're the one pushing the argument. Now, the other one being failure of the moral narrative, which was the Epstein files. We've been watching that play out for a while, but the promise was that there was going to be this exposure of all of these Democrats, that there was going to be a moral reckoning. We were going to get them. And the outcome was that there's been delay. There's been ambiguity about it. There's been a lot of procedural fog. It hasn't played out the way that it was said it was going to play out, even to the point that the leader was attacking anybody who wanted to see them after promising to show them to everybody. And so you have this moral breach at this point where there's a lot of shame and displacement happening in this particular narrative. And when we think about why now, I think it makes a lot of sense. We talked about it last week. The trust in the government is at an all-time low. So what do you do? What happens at that point? And I think that's just a piece of the puzzle, but I think that plays a big role.
If we reel back in the arc of this administration, they came in hot. They had a bucket load of things, and they were pretty simplistic solutions to pretty complex problems. They haven't worked out quite like one would hope. If you're on that side of the aisle, you would hope they had worked out. And they did start to fail after, about 6 months of doing this. There was that sense that Doge is not working like we thought it would. We thought there were all this fraud, waste, and abuse that was perpetrated by the Democrats, and we were going to come in and we're going to find trillions of dollars in savings. And as it turned out, they just didn't. And the ramifications of the cuts that they made really are going to come in the months and years down the line. So that didn't work. The immigration thing, which had incredible public support, but the way it was implemented, how it's played out, it's not necessarily worked like they expected it would. So it does strike me that very much like our Avatar episode some time back, that there was a need to find something else. Now, I guess what I'm really interested in is like Maduro makes a decent bad guy just on the basis of his behaviors, what he's done. And again, he's certainly not a good guy. I'm not going to lionize the guy, but there are a lot of bad guys around the world. And in fact, President Trump just recently pardoned a bad guy, a guy who, absolutely was engaged in the narcotics trade. Speaking of, I want your opinion on this. This is a divergence. Narco-terrorism. Help me define what narco-terrorism means, because we've accepted it.
I don't know that I've accepted it, but I think as a country,
we've accepted it.
What you're saying right now goes back to what I've been harping on for quite some time, which is that if you say something crazy enough at the end of your sentence, people will ignore the first part of the sentence and just accept it as reality. And I think this is one of Trump's superpowers, is that you just have to start off with the word narco-terrorist and then start talking about saving 500, 600, 700, 800% off of prescription prices. And people will immediately jump to the math. Does that mean that when I go and pick up my metformin, that they're going to pay me $2,000 to use it? And they ignore the narco-terrorist part.
When you take narco, which means drugs, and terrorism, and you smash it together, then you get like double bad. Terrorism is bad. Narcotics are bad. Smash it together. Oh, this is really bad. But, fundamentally, terrorism is a thing. Terrorism is utilizing force, aggression, violence, and harm in order to make a political point and induce fear. Narcotics, anything related to that, is about selling drugs to people who want to buy drugs, and smashing them together, it doesn't actually work. That narco-terrorism, they're not utilizing this to induce fear or harm and to make a political point. They're making a buck because there's a market for it, and there's always been a market for it. And hey folks, there's always going to be a market for it. So the whole narco-terrorism thing in and of itself, the fact that we just swallowed that word, bought it, accepted it, that all the major news outlets utilize it, narco-terrorism. I probably heard narco-terrorism 80 times today alone, and nobody stopped to say, what in the fuck is narco-terrorism? No one said this. So here we are, narco-terrorism. And we have now invaded a country, abducted their head of state in the name of terminology, and he's going to be charged for narco-terrorism is what they said.
It is in Title 21 of the U.S. Code. The DOJ uses it in charging statutes, but here's where they typically use it. It's when drug trafficking conducted with the intent to fund, support, or advance terrorist activity or violence intended to influence government or civilian populations through drug-related activity. And I think you already said it. Does it really apply to what these guys are doing, which is trying to make a buck? selling cocaine.
Oh, they made a lot of bucks, I'm sure.
With every boat that gets sunk, they make even more money because they can just jack up the prices of the other boats.
Absolutely.
But is that money being used for terroristic purposes? I'm not an attorney. I have no legal background. I don't know, but if that's the definition, is that what's happening? My prediction will be this is going to be a real stretch when they actually bring him to face charges. And the DOJ, unfortunately, recently hasn't had the best of luck as far as actually getting all this stuff put through, because they have the tendency to
Be amateurs.
this particular charge may not fully apply to Maduro and his wife. Now, I don't know how his wife is involved at all, but here she comes.
She's coming.
But it does describe it, the illusory truth effect. We've spoken about it before. We see this all the time. In fact, I think, again, another superpower, when you repeat something over and over again, there's this cognitive bias. Your brain cannot help but to perceive something as being more and more true, regardless of accuracy, the more you hear something.
Stepping back, what I guess I keep getting struck by is from a human standpoint, and this is not from a podcaster standpoint that every time something crazy happens, I think, oh, this is good content. Fan-fucking-tastic. But from a human standpoint, it's all confusing to the point in which I just end up having to disregard it. It's a thing that's happening that I can't control, that I might not understand. I can't even invest in it. So I just bring it in. And, I've brought narco-terrorism into my brain. And now it's a thing. And when they say it, I kind of have a sense of what they mean. The fact that we're destroying boats filled with humans, killing them, okay, it's a thing. I brought it into myself. I accept it now. This is what we do. I would be curious how many boats are actually still making it through, though. We present it like we now have an impermeable membrane in the entirety of the Caribbean and Pacific. I tend to think that's probably false. I also think every time he says each boat kills 25,000 Americans, I start doing the math and I'm like, holy shit, if 25,000 Americans died every time a boat came through, we'd be down to like a population of nothing by now. I've accepted it though.
Yeah, the numbers don't really line up. Fortunately, the number of fatalities related to drugs are actually going down
Significantly.
Now, they've been going down since the pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
but they are down. I mean, they're still too high for sure. I don't think that's up for debate. The question is this the method to get them down? The reality is that fentanyl is the driver of most deaths or things tainted with fentanyl. And fentanyl is typically produced or moved into the United States through Mexico using product that is brought there from China. And we're not blowing up their boats because they're not using them.
Hard to blow up shit they ain't using. Yeah.
Cocaine is coming from Venezuela, but other countries in much greater numbers. So the idea of blowing up boats to help protect drug trafficking is the figurative equivalent of you waving your left hand to slap your brother with your right. And I think we've all been slapped a whole bunch of times now.
We keep falling for it, just like he did.
The big right
He's an
hand
idiot.
was Maduro, right? Was taking Maduro. But the question then is, well, why are we triangulating Venezuela? My guess is that for triangulation to really work, you need some things. You need to have something that's symbolically bad, emotionally distant, check, structurally weak. I mean, we flew right into their country and took their president. That doesn't inspire a lot of confidence in their defense, but especially that they knew we were doing it. Narratively flexible, I think, check. Yeah, there's definitely a narrative that's being pushed forth still. And then the idea of being capable of restoring a sense of control. Well, I don't know if you watched the press conference, but there was, especially Marco Rubio, if you listen to anything that he said, this president, when he says something, he means it. He's going to do it. Everybody be on the lookout. He's coming. And I think that was it. I mean, that was we're going to get in control of a narrative and we're going to do this. Perfect Bowen family systems theory triangulation. This parent's not doing anything. These people are anxious. We're anxious. Let's do something to try to regain some level of control. Just because it's not working doesn't mean it's not there.
I did watch the press conference and I got lost in the information because I was so taken aback by how much Hegseth and Rubio, how much time they spent stroking the ego of our dear leader.
It's surprising. Have you watched any of their
cabinet meetings? Yeah. It was striking in my half century of life, I cannot recall a time where an activity engaged in by the government had to be tied to the greatness of the leader. That usually it was, we did this because it was necessary, had nothing to do with the quality of the leader. It wasn't used for self aggrandizement. In this case, it's absolutely all about self aggrandizement. However, set that aside. That was just striking to me.
Sure, easy to set aside. Let's just take that and we're just going to sweep that under
Well,
the rug. We'll ignore the fact that 70% trust rating in our government, followed by the verbal fellation of our president during a press conference after dozens of people put their lives at risk to do something. Sure, ignore that. Ignore that. Just ignore that, Robbie. Don't worry about that shit.
By the way, to our tens of listeners, if you can YouTube this press conference. So you can't see Hegseth through much of the press conference. You can see Rubio. Rubio is right inside the camera. I have never seen someone struggle to not roll their eyes and to look less bored than Rubio. He really was struggling to get through some of the stuff that was being said. All right. Let's set it aside. And unfortunately, I think this is part of it. And I'm going to get to this. The concept of collective dissociation is where I'm rolling toward. We'll set it aside for a moment. Ultimately, the question that we're faced with right now is why? Why Venezuela? Why not any other country that is led by a bad guy? Argentina. How about that? But no, we're thick as thieves with Argentina. Why Venezuela? Why now? How much of this lead up was constructed purely to get to this point? And it certainly feels like everything that's been done in the last 3 or 4 months has absolutely led to this point. You got to lay the groundwork. And they did it. And they did it in such a way that we're all just like, meh, all right. Yeah, this is what we do now. This is normal.
It's twofold. The target, they've been working on that for a few months. The votes, narcoterrorism, labeling all of these things. Perfect target. You have all the things I said. They have a questionable leader. You have a villain who clearly did steal their last election. You know that the populace doesn't love the guy. He's a dictator, done some awful things, but they're also sitting on top of huge oil reserves that aren't being fully tapped. And we like oil. The why question of Venezuela is easier than the why now. Why do it at a time where they expressed extensively the weather wasn't great, was really difficult? Why do it at that time? Well, things aren't working out so well for this administration at the moment. You needed a win, and now you got some kind of win, and potentially you got a whole bunch of oil. Now, how people are going to think about taking another country's oil and selling it is questionable, but I don't know that this administration has ever shown a lot of long-term thinking in that way, and frankly, maybe people like it.
Yeah, I suppose that ends up being in the political realm. What has really struck me is that this is a relatively enormous thing. This is a big deal. How many times in the history of our nation have we invaded another nation, kidnapped their leader? And this is aside from whether he deserved it. I'm making no calls to the morality of this individual, but this is an enormous thing. It really feels like no one feels it. And it struck me just how I saw the news. I saw the event the other morning at like 5 in the morning, whenever I get up. And, kind of shrugged my shoulders and like, yeah, we do that, whatever, and moved on. And as I have thought about it, how much it has not impacted me, here's the factors. It was surgical. So to my knowledge, no U.S. soldiers were killed. Now, I think there were some that were injured. There's some hints that there were some injuries. They haven't really talked about them at all. It was bloodless as far as the population is concerned. It happened, it was successful, and it ended. So with that structure, we don't even have to think about it. We're structured in such a way as humans to think about things that are problems that we have to deal with, we have to manage, we have to engage in. And this is not one that really presents with those sharp edges that we have to do something about this. The psychological tendency is to take it because it doesn't have sharp edges. No one died. It's over. we got him. He's on his way here. We can then just sort of dissociate emotionally from the event and not treat it like it was a massive deal. This is the kind of thing that, like, in the history of the world, this doesn't happen. You don't invade a sovereign nation and steal their head of state. I don't know how many times this has happened. I know of Noriega in Panama. We did that. And I know this one. There may be others. I don't know. I'll have to Google that.
Sure, it happens, but I think the rarity here is holding a press conference saying that, oh, yeah, we did that for a country that we were not actively engaged in a war with. He just met with Putin not long ago. They could have just, had him show up and
snatched his ass.
You're not leaving. Just kidding. Hang out. We didn't do that. So, yeah, it's a big deal, but it's overwhelming. I think there's this overwhelmingness to it. As you watch a car accident occur, it's so surreal. There's that, what just happened in front of me? And you're not really sure how to react. Now, in your defense and everybody else's, this happened on a Saturday. It happened when, even if big news channels are picking it up, I haven't really gone deep into it. I think it's going to take a little bit of time, if it hasn't already, hit people as to the significance of what just occurred. What struck me watching it was what wasn't being said in the press conference. That's what is going to be broken down over the coming days and weeks.
Well, that's it. The premature closure, that it's presented like this happened, it's over, we're done. Yes, we didn't get a say, we didn't get to vote on this, we didn't get to say, go, no go. And there's a lot of decisions that's the reality of them. They have to be made in the immediacy. But invading another country and stealing their head of state does strike me as something that maybe should have got some, at least if we're following the norms of our nation, should have got some buy-in by, I don't know, the legislative branch that is supposed to authorize war, etc. There's also a scale mismatch that abstract power bypasses the nervous systems. This is the exertion of power on a scale that we as humans can't even begin to imagine. And there's habituation, that we have been subjected to repeated norm violations. The norms have been broken over and over and over again. So we're just not even remotely sensitive to norm violations. And this is a violation of a norm.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not making a moral judgment here, that, whether Maduro is a bad guy, whether he deserved this, whether this is good in the grand scheme, I'm not even trying. What I'll say is that it is an incredible deviation from the norms of how nations are supposed to act. And, there's international law that says don't go kidnap heads of state, don't attack other nations. They're going to fall back to, hey, we did this for self-protection. Their drugs are killing 25,000 Americans with each boatload, which is utterly ridiculous. That's a statistic of how many people die per year of drug overdoses per boat. There's no basis in reality, but they'll say this was self-protection, that this was national defense, and it's just not.
Yeah, but there's a built-in narrative that comes from even challenging that narrative, which is, what, you like drugs, you like people dying from drugs. That's a straw man argument, but it is definitely going to be used. It's been used a lot. How dare you question blowing up these boats? Would you just like people trafficking drugs? And it's just no. But the nuance is what is trying to scream, and it's being silenced. And that is that, no, we have our laws. We don't do these things because our laws say that we don't kill drug traffickers. We can arrest them. We actually have the Coast Guard that does that. We have Customs and Border Patrol who got billions of dollars to be able to do more of that. We have the mechanisms to do these things in the American way. And as you're saying, we've just been ignoring our own norm for quite a while. This goes a bit further because this is starting to get into the territory, or has already been in the territory, of violating our own laws. We're just doing it outside of a jurisdiction where our laws really apply.
Why I'm mostly concerned about this, and we see this in psychotherapy, is that, patients come to us living in very abnormal environments, but they've been habituated to those environments to the point they're no longer aware. How many times have you sat with a patient that tells you something that is utterly inexcusable, utterly over the top, and they tell it in a voice that is just so deadpan and like normal. This is a thing.
All the time.
Yeah, a lot. And that's what struck me this morning. And it took me actually, most of the day to process it, that I am so untouched by this emotionally. And fundamentally, what it came down to for me, I've been habituated to these rule violations. And I was like, oh, this is a yet another rule violation. That part didn't stick with me. It just was a thought that I had. And then the way I immediately justified it in my mind is there's no blood. There was no cost to us. Now, was there blood? Yeah, I'm going to guess that good number of Venezuelans died in this action. That'd be my guess. No one's mentioning it. No one's saying, 800 Venezuelans died or 1,000 died or whatever the number is. But I find it hard to believe that this was a bloodless event in the grand scheme, but there is no American blood spilled. So I just don't have a somatic anchor to this. I have become habituated to this nonsense. I'm no longer emotionally impacted in the way I would have been a year ago, or certainly 2 years, 3 years. And I'm gonna guess. I mean, I'm gonna assume I'm average Joe, since I'm average in every other way, that most Americans hear this, shrug their shoulders, and move on. And that is a collective dissociation, that this is a big deal.
It is, and I think you're not wrong. I think most people, it won't affect them. They may not even know about it, and if they hear about it, they would have to look it up. Was Maduro a good guy? Was he a bad guy? Was he a Democrat or Republican? And when they figure out that he's neither, they won't know how to feel about
Was
it.
he red or blue? If he was red,
they won't.
no, that's a problem. If he's blue,
When they realize that all presidents in the last decade have not liked him, maybe they'll be whatever. But what I thought was striking about the press conference was what wasn't brought up. And I do think people need to maybe pay attention to that, because what wasn't said was there was no discussion of a restoration of democracy. There was no discussion about any new election timelines, no limits to the sovereignty of their nation, or any international consent. I worry that what was said was, we're going to control their country. We are going to stabilize their country. We are. And there was a lot of talk about oil and infrastructure. And that surprised me. That felt like
saying the quiet part out loud.
100%. Yeah, there was no attempt whatsoever to hide the fact that our goals in Venezuela are to rebuild their oil infrastructure so that we can use it. There was a lot of discussion about reparations for American companies that had been kicked out of Venezuela when the regime took over and created their own state-run oil companies. That was brought up specifically, along with, we're going to mine their oil, we're going to sell their oil, and it's going to help them, but it's also going to help us. The other piece, which makes sense psychologically, when the narratives that have been failing have failed, that we've already spoken about, the economic narrative has failed, the moral narrative has failed, you need something tangible to hold on to. And oil is one of them. It's an asset. When you lose the plot, you grab the furniture.
As I was watching it, it struck me that saying we are now going to run Venezuela, and it was said with that exact wording multiple times. What was left out is how are we sending folks in? Are we on the phone with them? Are we telling them this is what you're going to do? Or are we going to sit out in the ocean with our incredible fleet that has been arranged there and just say, do what we want you to do, or we're going to hurt you? That's the thing. When something like this becomes procedural, I think that's when we need to start to worry.
This is just another example of an administration that is really hot on simplicity and really cold on nuance. Because to clarify, there was a question of the president as to who would be running the country. And there was an answer that alluded to Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth, General Kane, along with a very supportive Delcy Rodriguez, who was the vice president and now apparently, per them, had been sworn in as president. The issue here is that since that was said, Delcy Rodriguez has come out and said, no, this was an illegal attack on our country, and we are not going to just do whatever you say. there's nuance to running a country like ours and certainly like theirs remotely. And there's certainly questionable perspectives on what's going to happen. Another question was posed, hey, are you going to turn the country over to the opposition leader, who was actually quite supportive of this from afar, had been like tweeting about it or something, some shit, I don't know, on social media, like, yay, this is the time for our coming or whatever, we're going to take the country back. By all counts, Machado had won the election in 2024, like 67% or something, or maybe, maybe was it higher, 76 or 67, 67?
It was
I don't know,
70-ish.
That's stuck in my head. Yeah, 70 something percent, and was part of the reason given to justify this action was that this Maduro was a bad guy, had stolen this election, so we're justified in taking him. But when the question came up, is she going to run the country? The answer was no, because she doesn't have the support of the people to run the country. I'm a gentleman, Robbie. You know that. I am a gentleman.
That, I have described you to many people, and gentleman is always the way I describe you.
Always it.
That and 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag. That's the other.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But so I'm not going to point out that a 70+% election win is significantly higher than the 50 point something, 51% victories of most of our presidents, in all fairness. 70+% is a lot of public appreciation. I won't point that out. Yeah. I'm not going to point that out because I think that's rude. I think it's rude to use numbers to just, it's just not nice.
Right. Don't use data. Facts.
Especially if you take in like the percentage of the voting population and then you like do the math on that, and it's more like 23%. But I'm not those, but which if you add 23% to the 50%, almost gets you to the
70%,
76% that she had. But that's rude. I wouldn't bring that up.
I agree. Which brings me back to 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag.
I'm a gentleman.
Yeah. When we boil you down, you're a gentleman.
Yeah. Here's where I think our show can be helpful.
That's good, because I would love to be helpful. Our tens of listeners, our niche audience, stand by, folks, because David is now telling you how we're going to help you.
And I'm going to be helpful-ish in no useful way. I mean, that's a problem. Will be helpful. Will it mean anything? No. In fact, I'm going full-blown ESPN mode here.
Okay.
We're going to get into some predictions. If we use the psychology, let's use Bohm family systems theory, and let's use the rules of triangulation escalates unless differentiation returns. You've even said it. This hasn't really triggered much for you. So Venezuela is probably going to provide temporary anxiety relief for the administration. Temporary, if any, but it's going to provide, hey, we did something, which means that unresolved anxiety will drive the search for the next third point. So we got to triangulate again, more than likely.
Mm-hmm.
What are our future targets?
Canada?
You think Canada?
No.
I think we could break it down into tiers, but in my tier 1, I think it's a close toss-up. I'm going to go with what I'm going with, only because Marco Rubio specifically called out the members of the government of this country. But number 1 to me is Cuba.
Oh.
I think it's Cuba. He flat out said, if I was a member of their government, I would be worried. He said that during the press conference. So I think Cuba is probably high on the list of being a third triangulation point. Low empathy cost, most people don't probably care. You can make a pretty good argument that we're helping those people out. Number 2 would be Iran.
Particularly now.
Yeah, absolutely. We've already attacked them. And Iran's an interesting country anyway, because nobody seems to like Iran in the Middle East. So there's some level of safety to that. Yeah. But it would be huge. There'd be a lot of grandiosity to it. It'd be enormous. Yeah. And then we could, claim global dominance. Those are my tier 1s.
And for our tens of listeners, they are Shia. And the rest of the Middle East, barring a certain percentage of Iraq, are Sunni. They take that very, very seriously. But yeah, Iran is not a popular actor among the other Arab states. When you think about the Arab states and you think about them being a unified bloc, they definitely are not. There's incredible amount.
No.
So those two are reasonable, Cuba and Iran. What I keep thinking about is also from family systems is that when something happens, it sets a precedence within the family, and then it becomes a norm. And from a international standpoint, the international family, we've just set a precedence, which is, hey, it's okay to go into a foreign nation, a sovereign nation, and do what you want if you have the power to do it. So now, what does that say to Russia? What does that say to China, specifically for Taiwan? It says a lot. We now have set up the social norm, the social contract. Yeah, this is okay. And if China would say, decide to attack Taiwan and kidnap their leader, which I doubt they would kidnap their leader. They'll just attack Taiwan to take Taiwan. But if they were to choose that, we have no moral high ground. We have no basis to say, oh, that's wrong. Now, will we? Yeah, probably.
Yeah, it's cute that you think that we are at a position to where we would give a shit about being hypocrites at this point. But cute.
Very
cute,
true.
Cute.
Very
Drink
true.
to that. Drink to your cuteness there, Robbie.
I would, but I'm out of coffee.
Bringing up Russia and China, I think those are two countries, or even North Korea, to be honest, like countries that would be triangulated, used for triangulation, but more, I think what you just said, more in a kind of a third party way where we would wait until they do something in response to what we just did to then use them as more of a bad guy than they already are. But in all fairness to talking about norms, Russia already invaded Ukraine. We've sort of accepted that. And I think even this administration has gone back and forth, but they've suggested several times to just give them the land that they took to just end the war, which I think was that was their peace plan, wasn't it? Was just go ahead and give up what we took and all will be well. What moral high ground have they had? They haven't had a lot of moral high ground.
The moral high ground's not a place that they've actually climbed to. So you gotta climb your ass up the hill in order to have the moral high ground. Donald Trump's not a man that wants to climb a hill.
I don't think Donald Trump's a guy who gives a shit about the moral high ground because he doesn't see it as morality as much as the ability to just make a deal.
I think it's venous stasis, actually, that's really getting in the way of him climbing the hill.
Anyway,
he likes very thin blood, apparently.
That's right.
Is
he
what
does.
I've heard.
And now the last piece, the last tier 3. So I think those are like Russia, China. Those are more like tier 2. Like they might go after them, but only after they've done something and, because we just did something. I think tier 3, which is honestly is already happening, is the, going after courts, universities, journalists, immigrants. I think those are the things where
done. Check.
They're already doing that. Yeah, it's already something. But the question is, to what extent? Because they've started it, with the exception of immigrants. They haven't gone full bore. There's more they could do if they needed to push a narrative further. Those are kind of like the low grade triangulation targets to try to ease some anxiety, at least on their part, and any failures that they're having.
Oh, I was just going to say, hearkening back to our Avatar episode, this fits. It's a display of power. It's a spectacle. It's, it's me waving my left hand so I can slap my brother with my right hand. He never caught on, folks. So those of you who might know my brother, you should probably bring it up to him that, why didn't you catch this? How many times do you fall for that? And I'll tell you, every time. That's how many times. Every time. I have a speculation. I'm a full-fledged adult, and so is he. I have a speculation that I could pull that off to this day. I could wave my left hand and slap him, and he would still fall for it. Anyway, yeah, so this is in keeping with the Avatar cracking. It's a display of strength.
But it's not strength. It's not strength. It's a display of attempt for strength. It's compensation. It is not strength.
Even Hegseth and Rubio, as they were stroking, I won't say what they were stroking, when they were playing toward Trump's ego, and I am way too erudite and way too much of a gentleman, really, is really what it comes down to tell you what they truly were stroking at that moment. All I can say is they needed a towel afterward. They just they needed a towel, no doubt. They had to wipe up after. They were trying to make him feel strong and powerful. It was a little nauseating, maybe a lot nauseating. It was a little distressing to me. I don't want a leader who needs someone to stroke them to be powerful. You are powerful by definition. Where you're at right now, this position is powerful. And if somebody needs to tell you it's powerful, that means you just need reassurance. It's scary to me. It's frightening. It's not a leader that I follow into combat.
No, this would be dating somebody who's constantly reaching out to you and saying like,
do you love me?
You sure? And eventually,
not anymore. I don't now.
No,
I
we're
did.
done. Yeah, we're
Yeah.
done now.
Yeah. I'm
No,
tired.
but the warning though is that unchecked overfunctioning that we're seeing leads to escalation. It leads to boundary erosion, brittleness of that authority. Relief is temporary. This is going to cause temporary relief while the news cycle doesn't really latch onto it to the extent that it's going to. We haven't heard the MAGA side of this at all. And I really wonder how they're going to take this, because what you're left with is you attacked a country, questionable legal authority, you took their leader, and then you said, we're going to run the country from afar. I don't know that MAGA is going to be cool with that.
The neocon arm of MAGA will be okay. The true America First MAGA is where it's going to.
Yeah, the question was posed, how is this an America First agenda? And the response was, well, we need good neighbors.
Well,
That's the real answer, but we need good neighbors. And I'm just not sure that if we look at a map, they're our neighbor.
it's a stretch. It's a stretch.
It's a weird map, but anxiety
Yeah.
always returns. And I think that's the gist of it, is that this was just another step. This was another crossing of a boundary after
Add it to the list.
countless. I mean, just, thousands upon thousands of it. This isn't foreign policy. It's a family system that lost the story and reached for control.
Yes. Yes. And when we're so habituated to it, we're just numb. We're the kids that are just so accustomed to the craziness between mom and dad that it doesn't even affect us anymore. We absorb it. We don't process it. We just file it away. And that's what we're doing. We're filing it away, one more thing, and moving forward. And here's my question to you. Do you have any prescriptions this week?
Yes, I do.
I only have one. Stop doing bad shit. We have to stop doing bad shit. There is a thing such as honor, integrity. There is the rule of law. There are norms, and we have to follow them, whether we like it or not, whether it serves our emotional purposes or not. We have to follow them because, I'm again going to fall back to Jim Jeffries. We live in a society, people. There are rules to this society. And in order to maintain the society that we actually love, that brings us comfort and security, we have to be members of that society.
I'm pretty sure Jim Jeffries stole that from George Costanza, but I'm just going to leave it there.
Maybe.
When you hear a claim repeated everywhere, write it down once, say it out loud, and then ask yourself, do I believe this because it's true or because I've heard it 12 times today? Try to fight the illusory truth effect.
Let me wax eloquent on the illusory truth effect. So I mentioned some episodes ago that my son came to me and said, did you hear that Charlie Kirk's wife's pregnant? And she's 8 weeks pregnant and he died 12 weeks ago. And he said, and then they think it's J.D. Vance's. And when I just a tacit like, hey, do you think that's true? And he's like, well, I heard it like 30 times today. But here's the fascinating part to me, and I actually brought this up to him this morning, is that it didn't come to pass. She is not pregnant. This was not reality. However, that part, it just slipped out of his mind. There was no follow-up to it. So how many things that we end up accepting as true that later are false, but then we don't change our behaviors or our thought processes about it. So I tried to make a point and it was completely lost.
Any explanation that requires a villain, a savior, and a silent third party, it's probably a triangle. Triangles stabilize anxiety temporarily, but they never solve the underlying problem. So if the solution is requiring someone else to hold all of the badness, keep looking. It's not the solution. And maybe my favorite, does this explanation make sense after 2 fingers of bourbon? If it still holds up, great. If it collapses into vibes, slogans, and confidence cosplay, put the glass down. You're being managed, not informed.
That's the truth. And there's a lot of managing going on right now.
I've had a few fingers of bourbon for sure, and this still doesn't make sense to me. So I think it's not real. Thank you to everybody who has joined us for season 2. So excited.
Episode 1, season 2.
We still need help sharing this show. So we know we're niche. We know we're somewhat controversial in this episode, but
a little bit annoying. We know this.
Maybe annoying. Yeah. I'm always that. I've known that for years. So have you.
Your wife tells you every day.
Oh my God. So much. But Please share us, subscribe to us, like us, write a nice comment.
Tell your friends. Word of mouth works.
We are growing slowly, but we are having some growth. We're going to try to do some changes over the next season to maybe get us a little bit bigger. But basically, we want to help. Hopefully, we're helping. If we're helping, let us know. Send us an email at socials@shrinkthenation.com. But thanks for joining us, Robbie. Anything else?
I got nothing, man. I'm done.
All right, then we're out. Till next time.